As you enter into the heated greenhouse, we have a number of woody plants here. We have some birches, a spruce, some apples, and then a number of other things, blueberries, etc. They're all being forced for specific gardens. The folks either had us pick them out at a local nursery or they brought them here themselves, and we bring them into the heat, and after a week or two or three, maybe even a month, they start to break bud. The birches were slow, and a week ago I was a little nervous about those, but they're breaking as of right now. 6 weeks from today is the actual day that we deliver the plants to the show. So at this point we start counting backwards to the show and determine how well the plants are doing to hit that target date. Some plants flower, some plants don't. Birches and spruces are great because we aren't looking for a specific flower show. When we do crab apples, then they want to go to the show just in bud, all ready to break. So different plants are different as far as how easy they are to work for forcing for a show. The woody plants we have, some have been in here since Christmas, others got here 2 weeks ago, and we will watch them, monitor them, and once they get to the point that we want them for the show, if we want to slow them down, we take them to a cold house, which we'll see later. But right now this is a warm house. This is a house that's set at 60 at night. So except for day length and light intensity, which are out of our control, the plants feel they're in growing season. So they start to bud and start to break leaf or break flower as well. As we work down through the greenhouse, we have different places that we use. These first 8 benches on the right here all have heat underneath the benches. In the white tubes is warm water that runs through the tubes 24 hours a day. It's heated by geothermal heat, but it could be heated by anything. But the warm heat underneath the plants forces them to germinate better, also helps them to grow quicker. So if we see plants that are struggling a little bit that we figure need some bottom heat, we'll bring them, put them on these benches, and hopefully we'll see them respond. The bottom heat is not hot by any means, but at least it's warmer than the 60 degrees they'd be getting otherwise. So every seed that we germinate is on these benches. Most of our new transplants are on these benches. The geraniums you see down further, those are on these benches just because we haven't moved them yet. Geraniums are a nice crop for a flower show because they'll flower all winter long, and they don't need extra lighting. They don't have to have this extra heat, and they do show pretty good color. So some plants are on here because that's where they are, and we haven't moved them yet. Other plants are here because we want them to do a little more root growth, a little more top growth before we move them to another spot. As we work down through the house, some of the plants you see are actually for our spring sales. We're starting now for sales that will occur in May, the middle of May, Mother's Day up to Memorial Day. So some of the plants in here are actually our spring crop, where a lot of what you see is for the flower show. As we move forward, the flower show proportion will be smaller and smaller as we fill each of the houses with spring sales, but for right now we have probably 5 or 6 benches of flower show plants. The lavenders, which are just beyond the geraniums, the lavenders were here since last summer. We potted them up, we've grown them on all winter, and they're flowering. Some of those will be used in the show, some of those will end up for spring sales as well. Beyond them are some ferns and then some thunbergia on hoops, which will be for the show. And the ones that don't sell, we'll hold on for another 6 or 7 weeks and sell them with our spring crops that go to the garden centers and landscapers. As we move in through to this house, this greenhouse is a little different in that it's a cooler house, it's 60 degrees, but this house has 4 sodium vapor lights in it. These 4 lights up at the ceiling give these 2 benches the equivalent of full sun. So they're set on a timer. I'll turn it on now. It will take a couple minutes to warm up. As I say, it'll take a short while for them to warm up, but you'll see the light intensity get brighter and brighter on these two benches. It takes probably 3 or 4 minutes for them to get to full power. So the plants that want stronger sunlight or longer days, we bring onto these benches. Later today we'll be hanging the hanging baskets because they don't need the extra light. They're blooming fine. They can go up at the ceiling. The grasses will move down to another bench because they're our spring crop, and we'll move a lot of those things that were on the heat to this area. So, excuse me. So under these 4 lights, we have some plants here on this bench that for the last week and a half have had extra daylight. We give them about 4 to 6 extra hours at nighttime. And the stalk is starting to flower. The osteospermum is starting to flower. We do have little oxalis here as well, some snapdragons. If we tried growing snapdragons without extra light, they would not work for the show. Our day length and the light intensity is just too short, and our light intensity is too low to grow a stocky snapdragon. Last year, for the first time, we got these 4 lights, put them up, and we were able to grow snapdragons for the show for the latter part of March and have them in bloom. So that's why the snaps are already under the longer daylight. Some of the other plants here, there's a chrysanthemum snowland over there that's all budded up. The ranunculus should come in very well. So these 2 benches later today will be full of just flower show plants that need longer days to flower. One thing people may not know is many plants are triggered to flower by the day length. It's called photoperiodism. And a short day, which is what we have right now, we have days that are shorter than the nighttime, many plants won't flower. So by giving them this artificial sunlight, we trick them into thinking it's summertime, and many plants will come into bloom that wouldn't otherwise. So this is just one more of the little tricks that we play, trying to force plants to get them ready for the show. It's a very complicated, detailed thing, and nothing ever works perfectly. We have plants that don't make the show every year. We have other plants that come in too early for the show, but we just do the best we can and hopefully have enough for the show that everybody's happy. We also force a number of perennials, which is on the other side of this greenhouse, and those were plants that we've had for the last 1.5 years in 2-gallon pots, most of them. We have hostas and heucheras and phlox. Those we just bring in, we don't give extra light, and they respond pretty well just with warmer temperatures. The hostas for the show could well end up a couple feet across. The heucheras will probably just be 1 foot, 1.5 feet across. The flowering on those is tricky. As you know, some perennials flower in the spring, some perennials in the summer. With the perennials, it's whatever we get, and primarily it's, for a lot of them, it's foliage that we're after. And then if we do get some blooms, that's just an added bonus. So I think now we'll go out to the cold greenhouse. As plants move along and they get too far ahead, especially if we're after one flush of flowers, we need to move them to a cold greenhouse where they slow down, and then we get them to the show at the right timing. So some of these plants, the annuals, many of those we let them continue to bloom because most annuals bloom all season long. When we get to perennials, we get to woody shrubs, and some of the annuals, they're going to have one big flush of blooms, so we need to move those to a cool house to slow them down. Other plants like bulbs we have out there already because we know if they were in the heat they would be long gone by the time the show came. So we're hoping to have some bulbs available for the show as well. But we're going out to that house now, which is another house which often gets down in the 30s at night. But we'll see you over there. So now we've entered the cold house. This house is the coldest house we have that doesn't freeze up. It has geothermal that heats the whole greenhouse. It has a shade curtain which keeps it a little warmer at night. When the sun's out, we open the shade curtain so the plants in here get full sun. In this greenhouse are plants that are either too far along or plants that we're nervous will come into bloom too quickly. There's things here like forsythias And most of you know forsythias, one of those April bloomers or 1st of May bloomers, and we don't want those to open too quickly. We have flowering almond, we have azaleas, and we also have some rhododendrons. All of those just came in here last week. They've been in a barn without any heat at all, and yet enough protection so they're not getting as cold as outside temperatures do get. So they're in here to slowly wake up. We had them in the other greenhouse for just a day or two, and we could see the buds already starting to swell, which got us nervous. We yanked them over here as quickly as we could last week. So all of these plants that I've mentioned are here to wake up very slowly. As I expect they will stay in here all the way until the show, 6 more weeks. If we get to 4 weeks from now and they're still looking like they need to get pushed a little bit, we may move them to the heat just for a few days and then bring them back over here. We have other plants in here that we moved in about a month ago, all of the roses. These are Easy Elegance, which are like the Madyland roses, an ever-blooming rose that blooms all season long. We moved those here about a month ago because we could see that they were growing so quickly in the other greenhouse, we didn't want to have weak growth. If woody plants grow too quickly, then the stems are weak and they end up flopping over. So just like a bulb would be being grown too quickly, we don't want that collapse, so we bring them in here where they'll grow slowly. So probably 2 weeks before the show, we'll take all the roses back in to get full sun. The bulbs that we've brought in, and then the dianthus, which is a perennial, we've brought those in because they like it cool anyway. We all have seen bulbs coming up through the snow. We know they can take it very cold. And as I already said, if we had those in the heat, they could grow a couple, 3 inches a day to where then they collapse over because they're just growing too quickly. So the bulbs all came in about 3 weeks ago, the dianthus about 3 weeks ago, and they're essentially where they were where we brought them in. They have grown a little bit. Every year we keep detailed records. We have had frustration after frustration with the bulbs, trying to get bulbs to come in for the show. And we've had them come in into April when they finally were blooming. We've had them where they wouldn't come out of the soil at all. So each year we're keeping very good records on when we sow them, when we keep them in the cold barn, and then when we bring them into the cool greenhouse, so that maybe as years unfold we'll get better and better with forcing of the bulbs. The last plant in here, there's a whole bunch of rosemary, and the rosemary's in here for an interesting reason. Rosemary can take it very cool. It can take it down to frost, and this house gets probably in the mid-30s when it's -20 outside. But the biggest culprit with rosemary is powdery mildew. And if we have those in one of the other greenhouses, they will be covered with powdery mildew, and then we can't sell them. So this year we knew this house was going to be here. It wasn't going to freeze. We decided in November or October, let's put the rosemary in the cold greenhouse, see if we can grow it without powdery mildew. And that's exactly what's happened. It's just as robust as can be. And so that has been in here all winter long. That's the only crop that has. And then, as I said before, all this other material was in a cold barn storage until it came in here. So even a week from now, we should see these that look like lifeless stems. They should be leafing out. If anything, they might be too far ahead. If we have a week that's, let's just say 50 degrees in full sun, we have nowhere to put them to slow them down more. During the daytime, they could end up doing a lot of progression toward bloom, and there's nothing we can do about it other than open the doors. But if it's already 50 outside, they're going to be in a hot spot. Other than setting them right next to a snowbank, there isn't a lot we can do. So we're kind of hoping for a normal season, and yet we know in between all that there will be some warm days. So when the sun comes out, this house we need to vent very quickly in the mornings. Certainly not 6 or 7 o'clock, But even if it's 20 degrees outside and full sun, it'll be 70 degrees in this greenhouse. So we need to open these sliding doors, let the cool air come in, and keep this pocket of the greenhouse cooler. The rest of the greenhouse is empty. That will be filling up for spring in another 4 or 5 weeks. So for right now, it's fine that we let this area get cold and try to hold these things back. And then we just move plants all spring long. Anyone that's ever forced for the flower show knows moving plants is just a matter of each day looking, seeing what's too far ahead, cooling it down, what's too far behind, warming it up, or giving it more light. And that's the game we play. And hopefully 6 weeks from today, everything will be, or most everything will be in good shape to go down to the show. So we hope we see you all there.